This happened last year. I moved into this cute little house on Maple Street. Quiet neighborhood, everyone seemed friendly enough. There was this one couple next door though, the Johnsons. They were different. Mr. Johnson was always outside, tending to his garden or fixing something around the house. He'd wave, but he never really talked much. Mrs. Johnson, she was a bit more chatty when we first moved in. She brought over some homemade apple pie, said they were happy to have us as neighbors. But here's the thing, after that first week, I barely saw her again. It was always just Mr. Johnson out there, working on something or other, and he'd hum this tune. This weird little melody that seemed to get stuck in my head every time I heard it. I swear, even when I thought I wasn't hearing it, I could still feel it, like a tickle at the back of my mind. Anyway, one night, our dog Max starts acting funny, barking at nothing, whimpering at the door like he wants out but then won't go near the fence once we let him outside. I thought maybe he'd caught sight of a raccoon or something, but it went on all night. I was exhausted by morning. The next day, I woke up to find Max wouldn't even come into the bedroom. He just sat at the door, whining and looking back at me like he wanted me to leave. It was weird, but I figured he'd snap out of it eventually. I had work, so I left him with some food and called it a day. When I got home that evening, Max was gone. No sign of him anywhere in the house or the yard. I started to panic, calling his name, looking under beds, in closets. That's when I noticed something odd. There were these marks on our back fence. Scratches, deep ones like something had been clawing at it for days. And there was this smell too, faint but persistent, like rotten apples. It made my stomach turn just to breathe it in. I figured Max must have gotten out somehow and run off. I put up posters around the neighborhood, asked people if they'd seen him. No one had, but everyone said they'd keep an eye out. Mr. Johnson saw me putting up a poster on his fence. He just nodded, didn't say anything, just kept humming that same damn tune. Days turned into weeks and Max was still gone. My wife suggested we get another dog, maybe a puppy to cheer us up. So we did. We named her Luna. She was adorable, all fluffy and eager to please. But she wasn't Max, you know. Something felt off about having her in our house. Then one night I woke up because I thought I heard scratching at the door. It was soft, rhythmic, like something was trying to get in but didn't want us to hear it. I got out of bed, walked softly towards the sound. Luna was there, standing by the door, her tail tucked between her legs, whimpering. The scratching stopped as soon as I reached them. I opened the door, thinking maybe Max had come back or some other animal was outside. But there was nothing there. Just that smell again, stronger than ever. Rotten apples filling up my nostrils, making me want to retch. And then, faintly, I heard it, that humming. Mr. Johnson's weird little tune coming from next door. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and went back to bed. My heart was racing, but I couldn't figure out why. It was just a noise, just an odor. Nothing to be afraid of, right? Wrong. The next morning, we found Luna in our bedroom. She'd torn up one of our pillows, feathers everywhere. And there were these marks on the wall behind where our bed is, long, thin scratches, like something had been clawing at it from the inside. Like something wanted out but couldn't quite get there. That's when I started to feel it, that gnawing dread in my gut. Something wasn't right next door. Something wasn't right in our house. And suddenly, I was sure whatever was happening, it was connected. It had to be. I decided then and there to talk to Mr. Johnson. Maybe he'd seen something, heard something. Maybe he could explain the smell, the scratching, the humming. Maybe he knew where Max went. But when I knocked on their door, no one answered. I tried again, louder this time, still nothing. Then I noticed the house. It was quiet, no sounds of life at all, not even Mr. Johnson's constant humming. I went back home, grabbed my keys, and walked over to the side of their house where the garden is. I peered through the window into their kitchen. Everything was neat, like no one had been there for days. There were apples on the counter though, rotting away in a basket. The smell wafted out when I opened the window to call inside. "Hello," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Johnson. Silence. Then faintly, almost like it was echoing from far away, I heard it again. That humming. But this time it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the house, and it was getting louder. That's when I ran. I didn't wait to see if anyone followed me out. I just bolted back home, locked my door, and called the police. They came, asked questions, searched the Johnsons' house, but they found nothing. No sign of forced entry, no signs of struggle, no bodies. Just an empty house filled with rotting apples and that relentless humming. They couldn't explain it, so they left. And I was alone again in my quiet little house on Maple Street, listening to that goddamn humming coming from next door. Feeling something out there, watching me, waiting for something. Something that was growing closer, getting louder, more insistent with each passing day. I moved out a week later. Left our house, left the neighborhood, left everything behind. My wife said I was being irrational, that I was letting my imagination run wild. But she didn't see it, didn't hear it. She couldn't feel it like I could. And now every time I close my eyes at night, I hear that humming. I smell those rotting apples, and I feel it, whatever it is, getting closer. Closer to me, closer to my door, waiting for the day when it can finally come inside and make itself at home. That's why I'm here now telling you this story, because I need someone to listen, to understand, to believe that something is out there, something real and terrible and utterly insane. Something that shouldn't exist but does. Something that wants in. I live in this quiet little neighborhood. Houses are close together, but everyone keeps to themselves. Until this. There's this couple next door. Jim and Linda, they're called. Nice enough folks, kept their lawn tidy, never made a fuss. One day they moved out suddenly. No goodbye, no nothing. Just packed up one night and were gone by morning. House stood empty for months. Then one evening I saw this old woman moving in. She was hunched over, her hair all white, face wrinkled like a prune. Never saw her around before, but hey, people move in and out of these places all the time. First few weeks were normal enough. She kept to herself, never made a sound. Then I started noticing weird things. Like every night at midnight, her bedroom light would flicker on for exactly 5 minutes, then off again. Every night like clockwork. I thought maybe she was just an insomniac or something, but it got weirder. I have this old cat with the name of Whiskers. One night, he starts howling at the door around midnight. Never heard him do that before, so I let him out and he darts straight for the old lady's yard. I follow him over and there he is, staring up at her window. Bedroom lights on, flickering like always. But this time I swear I see something moving in the shadows behind it. A shape, big and dark, sliding along the wall. Too big to be a person, too fast to ignore. I grab Whiskers and hightail it back home. Next day I tell my friend about it, thinking maybe they saw something weird too. But they just laughed. Said I was imagining things, probably got spooked by some late-night TV or something. So I tried to brush it off, but every night that light would flicker on at midnight. Every night, Whiskers would howl at the door, and every night I'd see that dark shape sliding past her window. Then one night I couldn't take it anymore. I went over there, marched right up to her front door and knocked. No answer, so I tried the handle, it was unlocked. I stepped inside, called out her name. Nothing but silence. I made my way upstairs, heart pounding like a drum in my ears. Her bedroom door was open, light on just like always, but no sign of her. Then I noticed something strange. The wall behind her bed. It was covered in these marks. Deep scratches running up and down the plaster like someone had dragged long fingernails through it. I leaned in closer to get a better look, and that's when I heard it. A soft moan coming from the closet. I froze. Then I heard it again, a slow, raspy breath, like something was struggling to breathe. My blood ran cold. I turned around fast as I could and got the hell out of there. Didn't stop until I was back home, door locked behind me. And I swear from that moment on, nothing felt safe anymore. Because every night at midnight I still hear it. That slow breath coming from somewhere just beyond my wall. The old lady's side of the house. Like something's in there with her, something big and dark and wrong. And you know what? No one else hears it. My friend came over, spent the night, heard nothing but silence. Even Whiskers doesn't howl anymore. It's like it's just me hearing this thing. Just me knowing something's out there. So maybe I am crazy. Maybe I imagined all of it. But every night when that breath comes, I can't help but wonder, what if? What if there really is something in that house with us? Something we can't see, can't understand. Something that shouldn't exist. And then I remember those scratches on the wall, deep and ragged, like something was trying to get out. And I swear it feels like whatever's in there. It knows I'm listening. It knows I hear it breathing. And God help me, but sometimes I think it whispers my name in that slow, rasping breath. So yeah, that's my story. My eerie neighbor tale. Maybe you think I'm nuts, maybe you don't. But every time midnight rolls around and I hear that breath, I can't shake the feeling that something's out there. Something waiting for me to let it in. And that, my friend, is what keeps me up at night. I never thought much about my neighbor, Mr. Carl, before. He was old and quiet, kept to himself mostly. We didn't exactly have the best of relationships, but you know how it is. Everyone's got their own life. His place looked neat enough from what I could see through the fence, always spotless. I never paid much mind until one day something just felt off. It was a Monday morning when I noticed it for the first time. There wasn't anything really unusual about the way he walked his dog, but there was this look in his eyes, almost like he knew more than he let on. He always had that though, so maybe I was being paranoid. But then, every day after that, it happened again. Mr. Carl would be out at 6 a.m. sharp, walking his little dog, and something would catch my eye every single time. His eyes weren't focused on the road or the park nearby. They were fixed somewhere else. Somewhere beyond what I could see from my window. It was as if he was watching me. Now I know this sounds crazy, but it wasn't just a few times. This became a routine. Every single morning at 6 a.m., his eyes would meet mine through the fence, and for those brief moments, there seemed to be something more behind them. Like he knew things about me that no one else knew. I tried talking to him once just out of curiosity. I mean, it was the polite thing to do. But when I called his name from my yard, he didn't respond. He kept walking by like nothing happened, and all I got in return was a fleeting smile, but not one that reached his eyes. It started creeping into other parts of my day too. There were moments where I would catch myself looking out the window, expecting to see him standing there, just staring back at me. Sometimes it felt like he was watching from the shadows when I went for a walk in the neighborhood after dark. It wasn't even scary per se, more like a presence, an unwelcome guest who wouldn't leave no matter how loud you screamed. The most unsettling thing was that he never spoke to me again. Not once. Every time we would make eye contact through that fence, it felt like he was playing some kind of sick game with me. I could feel the unease growing inside me each day, but I couldn't shake off this nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. And then came the night when things really took a turn. I had been working late at home, and as usual, I looked out my window to check if Carl was still out there, walking his dog. But instead of seeing him in the yard, I noticed something else. Or rather, someone else. It was his dog, but it wasn't moving like a normal dog would. It was just standing there on two legs, staring at me through the fence. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it turned around and walked away without making a sound. I stood there frozen for what felt like hours. I couldn't believe what I had seen, or thought I saw. Was I losing my mind, or was something far more sinister going on? It's been a few days now since that night, and every time I look out the window, I can almost feel him watching me again. It's gotten to the point where I avoid looking at my yard through that fence for fear of catching his eyes. He's probably out there, waiting for a moment when he thinks no one is paying attention. I don't know what to think anymore. Is he just some old man with strange habits or something far more terrifying? Either way, I can't stop wondering, and that feeling of dread won't go away.